Today is February 22nd, 2019. My name is Roger Bonnefoy, and this video is called the Roger Bonnefoy Hypotheses on Planet Formation. Since this hypothesis could be applied to a vast majority of our stars, I will concentrate on our star, our sun, to explain how our planets were formed. In order for our planets to be formed, our sun had to be just formed at the prime of our sun. In our sun's prime, there was an enormous amount of slag produced. This was due to the vast materials used to form the sun. Slag is a leftover product after the desired metal has been separated from its raw ore. Slag is usually a mixture of metal oxides and silicon dioxide. Slag may also contain metal sulfides and elemental metals. Slag in its liquid state is called a slurry. This is one of the important things to know for my hypothesis to be established. Over a long period of time, the slurry is then pushed down at the sun's equator due to the sun's centrifugal force. It is during that time in which vast pockets of slurry made by our sun bind to each other. To understand how big this area of slurry is, take all the rocks in our solar system, planets, moons, asteroids, combine them together, and melt them to form slag or a slurry. Now this would be part of the slurry floating on top of our sun. Now visualize the slurry floating at the equator of our sun. The gases emitting from our sun at the equator under the slurry cannot escape due to the fact that the slurry forms a liquid barrier. Since the gases in the sun cannot escape, the slurry starts to bulge up because of the increased gas pressure underneath. Over a period of time, there is so much pressurized gas under the slurry that the slurry's ball becomes so huge that it forms a gigantic supervolcano. When too much gas pressure is produced under the slurry, it then has a tremendous eruption. The eruption propels the slurry, which with bits of fragments of our sun attached to it, into our solar system. Since this burst occurred at the equator and due to the sun's centrifugal force, the slurry's eruption would spray a vast majority of slurry and sun fragments into our solar system in a horizontal path. The sun's fragment, which had slurry attached to it because of the enormous eruption, would therefore be sent in a trajectory away due to the force of the eruption from the sun, to which is now our planet's orbital paths around the sun. Subsequently, these sun fragments, which had slag attached to it, the slag would therefore stay in its liquid state form. The gravitational pull of the sun's fragment would therefore orient to the center of the slurry fragments. The sun fragment is therefore enveloped by the slurry. Since the slurry is in its liquid state due to the sun's fragment's high temperature, it has to follow the same principle as any liquid and form a sphere due to surface tension. The sphere would form a membrane around itself and over a period of time would harden and become a crust. This is how the planets were formed and have their orbits were maintained. Now, not at all these planets are orbiting our sun. In order for the planets to rotate on its axis, it all starts with the slurry becoming spherical. Well, the sun of each of the planets tighten, since the trajectory from the sun caused the slurry in the sun fragment attached to it to be shot at an orbital angle. The planet, in its blob state, had a small bit of a spin, a small one. Now, with angular momentum, the more the blobs tighten, the more it would rotate on its axis. Angular momentum depends on two things: how mass is distributed and how fast it is spinning. For angular momentum to be conserved, if one of these two properties change, the other property has to compensate so that the total angular momentum stays the same or is conserved. Thus, while the slurry is tightening or becoming more spherical, the more of a spin on its axis each of the planets would receive, like that of a figure skater spinning tighter and faster. We now have a planet orbiting our sun while spinning on its axis with the slag as its crust, slurry or magma in the middle of the planet, and a fragment in the center of the planet keeping the slag in its slurry state. The creation of our moon on Earth is the same process as how our Earth was formed, except that when the slurry of our Earth left the sun, there was an offshoot of slurry with a small fragment of the sun attached to it at the end of it, roughly 384,400 kilometers away from the slurry of the Earth. This small blob was rotating with the Earth while the Earth was still in its blob state. Since the moon doesn't rotate on its axis, I determined that the offshoot which formed the moon was smaller than the size of the moon is today due to the principle of angular momentum. But since the moon was attached to the Earth and the Earth was rotating, that is what caused the moon to orbit the Earth. Now, if the moon had a rotation, it would mean that when it was at the end of the offshoot, it would have been a bigger mass of slurry. Since the blob state turned into a sphere, angular momentum would have to be conserved. Why does Venus rotate backwards? My hypothesis is the same as the other planets, except that while Venus was in a slurry state, that it was attached to the slurry state of the Earth while it was propelling away from the Sun, before the planets were each reaching the orbital paths around the Sun. Visualize a massive, elongated blob of slurry with almost equal-sized fragments on opposite ends, like that seen on Ultima Thule on January 2nd, 2019 by the New Horizons spacecraft, but in a way bigger scale. Due to the angular momentum, while the Earth and Venus' slurry are still trying to form each a sphere, they are both trying to rotate, but both planets are trying to turn counterclockwise. Since the slurry looked like a number 8 and that the Earth's rotation was greater than the Venus' rotation, that when the slurry broke at the focal point of contact between both planets, Venus just started to spin the opposite way, as Earth does. Since Earth is bigger than Venus, and when they broke off at the focal point, the Earth's counterclockwise force negated Venus' rotation clockwise, but due to Venus becoming almost spherical at the time, angular momentum just changed a little, thus giving Venus a slow clockwise spin, axis spin. The formation of our asteroid belt in our solar system would be the result of the blast wave. This would have occurred at the time of the explosion or eruption of the slurry on the Sun, when the slurry attached to the Sun fragments were shot or propelled out into space. When there is a huge explosion, a blast wave or shock wave, then when on land, occurs at the same time. The blast wave would have picked up loose slurry and shot it into space. Since no fragment of the Sun was attached to that slurry, no big spheres of rocks could be formed, thus no planets or moons, just globs of slag in space. In conclusion, I have shown you where the materials of planets and moons came from, how they got their orbit and rotation around the Sun, where our asteroid belt originated from, and why Venus rotates the opposite way. If you enjoyed this video, please select like. Tell a friend about this video, to look at this video and discuss this among your peers. This is called the Roger Bonnefoy Hypotheses on Planet Formation. Write to me if you have any questions about my theory. I live in Lorette, Manitoba, Canada. Thank you.